Hi and welcome. I'm very proud to present our paper, Show Me Millionaires, How Gender Bias is Reflected in the Query Formulation of Search Engine Users. My name is Simone Kopeinik. I'm co-leading the research area for AI at Node Center in Graz. And this is a joint work with our research partner, Johannes Kepler University Linz. So online information has become a daily routine for most people. This is why bias in online search results have such a huge impact. They can influence people's information space, and with this, their reality perception. From previous work, we already know that gender bias exists in search algorithms and search results. This might lead to the reinforcement of bias that again enters computational systems and algorithms via user interaction. Complementing the work on bias research in information retrieval, this paper focuses on the role of the user, studying whether and how users replicate gender bias in the formulation of search query. So let's start with a riddle that I borrowed from psychological research. A father and son are in a horrible car crash that kills the dad. The son is rushed to the hospital just as he's about to go under the knife. The surgeon says, "I can't operate. The boy is my son." Please take a second and think about it. What is your answer? The correct answer is the surgeon is the mother of the boy. Prior research found that adults are significantly more likely to interpret the scenario above with explanations about multiple fathers than by assuming that the surgeon could be female, well, the mother. But why do we think this way? One explanation is given by the prototype theory. Here I present a simplified explanation split in two parts, constructing knowledge and applying knowledge. In the constructing knowledge phase, we assume that people learn according to mental categories, where each category is formed around one or more prototypical examples. The membership of a category is defined by similarity to these examples. Then, in the applying knowledge phase, when people receive a stimulus from the outside world, they use existing mental categories to understand what they hear or see. If such a stimulus cannot be explained with an existing category, a combination of categories is mentally simulated. And this can be observed by a person's explicit naming of new properties. For instance, laughing cat, green banana, or male nurse. So coming to our contribution. How can we use prototype theory to measure gender bias in online search behavior? We draw on the following assumption. Gender stereotypes correspond to social categories of women and men. And they are learned and depicted in mental categories and additionally shaped by context. In a gender stereotype domain, the representative prototype of a category is either male or female. We further assume that this is observable in user search query formulation. To test this hypothesis, we asked study participants to formulate search queries to a given set of documents. These documents either replicate prototypical or counter-prototypical content of a gender stereotype domain. Here you can see the interface that emulates the look of a search engine. Located on the top is the text input field for the search query. Just below is the document example. This is a document showing counter-prototypical content. As shown in the table, title and content are provided in three versions: female, male, and non-gendered. If the gender described in the content of the document does not match the stereotypical gender expectation of the domain, we categorize it as counter-prototypical. For instance, if the content of a document describes a female character, but the stereotype of the domain is male, we categorize it as counter-prototypical, as illustrated in the first row of the table. Otherwise, if the gender described in the content of the document does match the stereotypical gender expectation of the domain, we categorize it as prototypical. An example for this is shown in row 2 of the table with the document title, What Enables Some Men to Become CEOs. Here the gender indication is male and the content categorized as prototypical. So in this way, we prepared 24 document variations for our experiment. We conducted an experiment at the online search platform Prolific with about 400 participants, more or less evenly distributed between males and females. For the study design, we split the participants in control and experimental groups, where both groups received 8 randomly assigned documents from the 3 document variations, either female, male, or non-gendered. The experimental group additionally received an indicative text about gender bias in online information. Here's a brief explanation of how we measure gender bias in this context. Well, in short, we calculate the proportion of gender mentions in response to counter-prototypical and prototypical document examples. In the first step, we apply a basic statistical measure, namely the relative frequency of gender mentions. Because in this research, we are interested in the difference between counter-prototypical and prototypical gender mentions, we have 2 formulas for the relative frequency. In the second step, we calculate the mention gap as the difference between the relative frequency of counter-prototypical gender mentions and the relative frequency of prototypical gender mentions. Summing up, the greater the mention gap is, the greater the gender bias. Do users replicate gender stereotypes in the formulation of search queries on the web? This can be answered with a clear yes. Research shows significant evidence of the reflection of gender bias in our participants' formulation of search queries. This results from the high difference between counter-prototypical and prototypical gender mentions. When looking at the complete document set, we find the value of 0.43. For the mention gap, this means that participants significantly more often mention a gender in the search query formulation when looking for documents with counter-prototypical content, for instance, male nurse or female CEO. Interestingly, in female stereotype domains, the effect is lower than in male stereotype domains. In fact, the observed statistical effect increases to 0.43 and the mention gap value of 0.5 when only looking at male stereotype domains. This is due to a lower frequency in prototypical mentions in male stereotype domains. For the second research question, we go into a little more depth. It is formulated as, does the extent to which users replicate gender stereotypes in search queries depend on personal characteristics? So basically, there are 2 main findings. A weak but significant correlation with the political view of participants. We found that the more conservative participants are, the more likely they will mention gender in a search query. A second influencing factor we identified is the participant gender. When compared to women, men are significantly less likely to mention gender in male stereotype domains. Also, men are significantly more likely to mention gender in female stereotype domains than they do in male stereotype domains. This means men more often write female nurse than they would write male CEO. We do not observe similar effects in female participants. This can be partly explained by higher flexibility in female gender roles. Research shows that women more commonly adapt masculine traits than men to adapt feminine traits. In practice, for example, amongst other factors, a better access to education for women has led to societal changes that qualify females for occupations with more status and income. But at the same time, men have not shown a similar adaptation towards domestic or caregiving roles. We consider this paper as a first step in early effort towards a deeper understanding of gender biases in users' online formulation of information search queries. And we do believe that the work opens up a wide range of future research opportunities and contributes with a number of points. Thank you so much for your interest. If you have any questions or if you're keen in a future collaboration, please feel free to contact me via email or even better in person at the conference.